I wasn't supposed to hear it. If the app had lagged one more second, or if I'd set the phone down instead of leaving it pressed to my ear, or if I hadn't been standing in my own kitchen at midnight, too wired to sleep, none of this would have happened, but the memo played, and I heard every word, and what she said, and it changed the whole shape of my life. Her name was Hannah, and she had been my best friend for almost 7 years. Long enough to know exactly how she took her coffee, which was too much cream and a stubborn refusal to admit it, exactly what her voice did when she was pretending she wasn't hurt, and exactly how many rings it took her to answer when I called late. Usually 3. That night, before any of this, it had been 1. "You make it home okay?" she asked the second she picked up. I caught myself smiling before I could stop it. "Hello to you too. Did you?" "Yes, Mom." "Don't start." That was Hannah, quick and warm and a little dangerous when she was in a good mood. We met 7 years back, out behind the hardware store, because she reversed her truck straight into the side of mine in the gravel lot, and then refused, flat out, to apologize for it. I came out with a bag of fence staples, and I found her leaning on her tailgate like the dent was somehow my fault for parking where trucks reverse. "You are unbelievably calm about this," she said. "I'm deciding whether you're worth the paperwork." I told her. She grinned at me. "I usually am." She was right. After that, we became the kind of friends people always read wrong. Late calls after long shifts, diner runs at hours no decent diner should be open, phone calls on bad days, phone calls on good days, phone calls when nothing at all was wrong, and one of us just didn't feel like being alone in a quiet house. People assumed there was more to it. We always said there wasn't. Or to be fair, I said there wasn't. Hannah usually just gave me that unreadable little smile and let people believe whatever they wanted. That should have told me something. So should the way she went quiet whenever I mentioned a woman I was seeing, or the way every date I ever went on felt temporary in a way she never once did? Some people become such a built-in part of your days, so woven into them that you stop asking what they mean because the honest answer feels too big to pick up. So I didn't ask. I just called her the way I always did that night, after a miserable dinner with a woman named Ashley, who had spent most of the meal checking her reflection in the back of her spoon. "That bad?" Hannah asked when I finished. She asked me if I thought emotional availability was hereditary. That is a real sentence a grown woman said to you? Dead serious. Hannah laughed, soft and bright, and familiar enough to make the whole wasted evening feel lighter. "Please tell me you at least got a decent steak out of it." I paid $34 to be psychologically evaluated over a sirloin. "That one is on you." I was trying to keep an open mind. "You were trying to be politely stupid." Also true. I could hear her moving around her place while we talked, a cabinet, the tap running, the low tick of her furnace kicking on. It was such an ordinary call. That was the part one keep coming back to. So ordinary that I almost missed the way she kept going quiet every single time I circled back to Ashley. "You know," I said, towing my boots off by the door, "I think I'm officially done letting people set me up." "That's probably healthy. Or dramatic. With you it tend to be both." I laughed and leaned against the counter. "What would I do without you?" The line went quiet. Not dead, just that small pause that means a question landed somewhere deeper than it was aimed. "Hannah, I'm here." Her voice had shifted a little, gone softer, and then she cleared her throat and said, too lightly, "Probably date women who don't cross-examine you over dinner. That's a high bar. You'd be surprised how low the current one sits." I smiled. "Night, Hannah. Night, Danny." I ended the call and set the phone face down on the counter, and that should have been the whole small, good, ordinary end of an ordinary day. I was halfway to the sink when my phone buzzed on the counter. One message from Hannah, a voice memo, 41 seconds long. I figured she'd thought of one more thing to give me a hard time about, the way she always did after we hung up, so I hit play and kept rinsing my mug. For the first second or two, it was just noise, the shuffle of her moving, a door, and then her voice came through, closer but not aimed at me. "Sorry, hang on, I meant to send that to Meg," she said, and I almost stopped it right there because clearly the thing had gone to the wrong person, but I didn't, and the recording kept running, and Hannah kept talking, thinking she was leaving it for someone else. "Okay, Meg, I know what you're going to say." Another voice would have been on the other end of a real call, but this was just her rehearsing the way she did before hard conversations. He called me again tonight, she went on, and her voice sounded tired, worn thin, in a way it never once sounded when she was talking to me. After another bad date, and I sat there and did the thing I always do. I made him laugh about it. I told him she was beneath him. I sent him off to try again. Something in my chest pulled tight. I set the mug down, and I don't know how much longer I can do it, Meg, because that's exactly the problem. There was a pause where I could hear her breathe, and then she said it in a voice so plain and so honest, so stripped of the jokes, that it barely sounded like the woman who could laugh her way through anything. I'm in love with him. I have been for years. And every time I help him find a next girl, I'm helping him leave a little at a time, and I keep smiling through it like being his best friend is enough. It isn't. It stopped being enough a long time ago. The memo hit 41 seconds and went silent. I stood in my kitchen with the tap, still running, and did not move. Here is the part one I'm not proud of. My first thought, the honest, ugly first thought, was that I had misheard her, that she meant something smaller, that in love was just a thing tired people say about their friends at midnight. I actually reached for that because reaching for was easier than the alternative, easier than admitting that a woman I had leaned on for 7 years, my steadiest person, had been quietly carrying this the whole time, holding it alone while I called her at midnight to complain about strangers. And then the excuse fell apart because you don't rehearse a line like that. You don't send it to your oldest friend and get her name wrong out loud, unless it is the truest thing you have. So I stopped pretending I'd misheard. I turned off the tap. I stood there in the quiet and let the real weight of it land. She was in love with me. She had been for years. And I had never once looked straight at it, because looking straight at it would have cost me something, and it was so much safer to keep her exactly where she was, close enough to call, far enough that I never had to be brave. I thought about all the small things then, the ones I'd filed away as nothing. The way she'd go still whenever I mentioned a new woman, then rally with a joke a half second too late. The way she remembered the name of every diner waitress in town, yet never once asked to be introduced to anyone I dated. The way she'd said, more than once in that light tone she used for the true things, that she had bad luck and had made her peace with it. I had heard all of it. I had noticed all of it the way I notice everything, and I had let myself understand none of it, because understanding it would have meant doing something, and I had spent 7 years being very good at not doing something. My phone buzzed again. Hannah. A text this time, fast and clipped. Ignore that memo. Sent it to you by accident. Meant it for Meg. Delete it, please. Then, a second later, Danny. Then a third. You didn't listen to it, right? And I stood there looking at those 3 little messages stack up, each one more careful than the last, and I understood, with a strange steadiness, that whatever I did in the next few minutes was going to divide my life cleanly into a before and an after. I could type back, didn't hear a thing, and hand her the exit she was begging for, and we could both climb back into the safe shape we'd worn for 7 years, comfortable and hollow, and never speak of it again. That was the easy road, and God, part of me wanted it because the easy road was familiar and it didn't ask anything of me. I stared at the screen a long moment. Then I did the thing the old me never would have done. I didn't type a lie, and I didn't smooth it over, and I didn't give her the out. Instead, I called her. She let it ring 4 times. That alone told me everything, because Hannah never let me ring 4 times. When she finally answered, she didn't say hello. You listened to it, she said, and it wasn't a question, and her voice was small in a way I had never heard from her, not once in 7 years. Yeah, I said. The silence that came back was the worst kind, not angry, mortified, the sound of someone wishing the floor would open. This was a woman who could argue a part supplier down to cost, who could walk into a crowded diner and have the whole counter laughing inside a minute, and she had gone completely quiet, undone by a machine she forgot to check. I can explain it, she said finally. And even she seemed to hear how thin that sounded the second it left her. You don't have to explain it, I said. That's easy for you to say. No, I said, and I meant it. It really isn't. Another silence, and then quieter. I didn't mean for you to ever hear that. I know, and now everything's going to be weird, and I'm going to lose the one thing she stopped herself. Just tell me we can pretend I never sent it. Please. I'd rather have you as my best friend than not have you at all.
I wasn't supposed to
There
hear
it was. The
If
exit
the app had
held out
lagged
to
one
me
more
with
second,
both hands,
or if I
the
set the
safe
phone
road
down
we'd
instead of
walked
leaving
for
it pressed to
7
my
years,
ear,
all I had to do
or
was
if I
take it.
hadn't been
The old
standing
me
in
would
my
have
own
taken
kitchen
it
at
the
midnight,
old me would have
too
made a
wired
joke
to
to break
sleep,
the tension.
none of this
and
would
let her
happen,
off
but
the
the
hook.
memo played,
Buried
and I
this
heard
the way
every
we buried
word,
every
what she
almost
said
thing
and
between
changed the
us,
whole shape
and told
of my
myself
life.
I was being kind.
Her name was Hannah.
I stood there
and
with
she
the
had been
phone
my
against
best
my
friend
ear,
for almost
boots
7
still
years.
off,
Long
and
enough
felt
to know
how
much I wanted to do
how
with
she
exactly
took her
that,
coffee,
because
which
it was
too
familiar,
much cream
and
a
it's because it
stubborn
asked
refusal to
nothing
admit
of
it.
me. And then I
Exactly
didn't.
what her
Hannah,
voice did
I
when she
said,
was pretending
"What?
she wasn't
Don't
hurt,
decide that for me."
and exactly
She went
how many
quiet
rings
again,
it took her to answer.
but it was
when
a
I
different
called late.
quiet this time.
Usually 3.
Careful
That
listening.
night, before
What does
any
that
of
mean?
this,
It
she
had been
asked,
one.
and I could
You
hear
make it
that
home
she was
okay?
almost afraid
She
to.
asked the second she
I looked
picked
around
up.
my kitchen
I caught
like
myself
the answer might be
smiling
written
before I could
somewhere
stop
near the
it.
sink.
Hello to
or
you too.
on the
Did you?
fridge, taped
Yes,
up
Mom.
with the takeout
Don't
menus.
start.
That
And
was
it wasn't
Hannah,
there because it was
quick
already
and
inside
warm
me,
and a little
and it had been
dangerous
for
when she
longer
was in
than
a
I'd
good
ever
mood.
let myself
We met
count.
7 years
It means
back,
I've spent a long
out
time
behind a
not
hardware
asking
store
myself
because she
the right
reversed her
question.
truck
I
straight
said,
into the side
"What
of mine
question?"
in the gravel
I heard her
lot,
breathe in,
and then refused
why every woman I go
flat
out
out
with feels
to
wrong.
apologize for.
Somehow, I came out with
the
a bag
second
of
I start telling you
Staples,
about her.
and
The silence
I found
after
her
that was a
leaning on
new
her
one
tailgate like the
entirely
dent
not
was
broken,
somehow my
not
fault,
braced for
just
parking where
listening,
trucks reverse.
and I kept going before
You
I
are
could talk
unbelievably
myself out of it,
calm
because
about
I had spent
this, she
7
said.
years talking
I'm
myself
deciding
out of
whether
it,
you're
and I was
worth the
done.
paperwork.
You want the truth?
I told her.
I think I called
She
you
grinned
after
at me.
every bad
I
day.
usually am.
All of them.
She was right.
Because you were the
After
person
that we
I actually
became
wanted to be
the
talking
kind of
to.
friends
I just never
people
let myself
always
finish
read
that
wrong.
thought.
Late calls
Which is a
after
pretty
long
embarrassing
shifts,
way to live.
diner runs and
Once you
hours
say it out
no
loud.
decent diner.
When she
should
spoke
be
again, her
open.
voice had
Phone
changed.
calls on bad
Still
days.
nervous,
Phone calls
but
on
softer.
good days.
The
phone
fear
calls when
draining
nothing
out
out
of
of
it
it
by
wrong.
degrees.
And one of
Are
us
you
just
saying
didn't
this
feel
because
like
you
being
feel
alone in a
bad?
quiet
She
house.
asked. People
Because you
assumed there
heard
was
me,
more to it.
and now you
we
feel
always said
guilty,
there wasn't,
and you're trying to be
or to
kind.
be fair, if that's what
I
this
said
is,
there wasn't.
Danny,
Hannah
I
usually
need you
just
not
gave
to.
me that
I mean it.
unreadable little
I would rather
smile
you say
and let
nothing
people
than
believe
say
whatever
something
they
you
wanted.
wanted.
That
I'm
should have
not.
told me something.
I said.
So should
You
the way
feel
she
that
went
sorry for me.
quiet whenever
I don't
I
feel
mentioned a
sorry
woman
for
I
you
was
at all.
seeing,
I leaned
or
back against
the
the
way
counter.
every date
Suddenly,
I
too
ever went
restless
on felt
to hold
temporary
still.
in a way she
The worst part
never
of hearing
once
that
did.
memo
Some
wasn't
people
that it shocked
become
me, Hannah.
such a built-in
I keep trying to
part of
find
your
the
days,
shock,
so
and it isn't
woven
there.
into them.
The worst
that
part
you
was
stop
that it
asking
made
what
too
they
much
mean
sense.
because the honest answer
fit
feels
every
too
single
big
thing
to pick up. I'd noticed
So I
about the
didn't
last
ask.
7 years.
I just called her the way
all
I
of it,
always
and
did
stubbornly
that night.
refused to add up.
After a
You
miserable
didn't
dinner with a
blindside
woman
me.
named
You just said out
Ashley,
loud the
who
one
had spent
thing
most
I'd
of the
been
meal
too much
checking
checking
her
her
reflection
reflection
too
in
long
the back
to
of
look
her
at.
spoon.
I heard
That
something
bad.
on her end.
Hannah asked
A
when I
shaky
finished.
breath. She asked
Maybe
me
the
if I
start of a
thought
laugh
emotional
that didn't quite
availability
make it out.
was hereditary.
What do we do now?
That is a real
she
sentence a
asked, and her
grown woman
voice
said
was so
to you.
careful,
Dead
so
serious.
unlike her. Hannah
that it
laughed,
nearly undid
soft
me.
and bright.
I didn't hesitate
and familiar
this time.
enough to make the
I'm
whole
coming over.
wasted
What?
evening feel
Danny,
lighter. It's the middle
Please
of
tell
the
me you
night.
at least got a
I'm not
decent
doing
steak
this
out
over
of
a
it.
phone.
I
You didn't
paid
mean to send me.
$34
I'm already
to be
getting my boots
psychologically evaluated.
You are
over
impossible,
sirloin.
she said.
That one
And
is
there was
on
the
you.
smallest
I was trying
thread
to keep
of
an
a
open
laugh in it
mind.
now.
You were trying to be
Disbelieving.
politely
You've known that
stupid.
for 7 years.
Also true,
I said.
I could hear
And
her
yet,
moving around
she
her place
murmured,
while we talked.
and that one nearly
The
got me
cabinet,
out the door.
the tap
before I
running,
even hung
the
up.
low tick of
What
her
would you have done in
furnace
my
kicking on.
place?
It was such an
Standing in that
ordinary
kitchen
call.
with the phone
That was
in
the
your
part
hand.
one keep coming
Tell
back
me in the
to.
comments.
So
I'd like to
ordinary
know.
that I almost
because I
missed
hung
the
up
way she
and I
kept
found my
going
boots
quiet
and I went.
every single time
She
I
lives a
circled back
6-minute
to
drive
Ashley.
across town.
You know,
past
I
the
said,
shuttered
towing
feet
my boots
store
off by
and
the
the one
door.
traffic light
I think I'm
that
officially
blinks
done
yellow
letting
after
people set
midnight.
me up. I made it in
That's
5.
probably healthy.
When she opened the door,
We're dramatic.
she was in an
With you intend to be
oversized
both.
gray
I
sweater
laughed
and flannel
and
pants,
leaned against the
hair
counter.
loose. What would
and
I do
still
without
damp
you?
at the ends.
The line
Her
went
face
quiet.
pink with the kind
Not
of
dead.
embarrassment.
Just that
she
small
clearly
pause that
wasn't
means a
used to
question
wear.
landed
For
somewhere
a second,
deeper
neither
than
of
it was
us
aimed.
said anything.
Hannah, I'm
we just
here.
stood in her
Her
doorway,
voice had shifted a
looking at
little,
each other, gone softer, like the whole 7
and then
years
she cleared her
shifted
throat
an inch
and
under our
said,
feet,
too lightly,
quietly.
Probably
Neither
date
of us
women who
trusted the
don't
floor yet.
cross-examine you
This
over
is
dinner.
deeply
That's a high
humiliating
bar
for me.
You'd be surprised
She said
how low the
finally.
current one sits.
I almost smiled. I smiled.
You still look steadier
Night,
than
Hannah.
I feel.
Night,
That is
Danny.
not comforting.
I ended the call.
It wasn't
and
supposed to
set
be.
the phone face
It was
down
just
on the
true.
counter.
That
And
softened
that
something
should
in
have
her
been that
face,
the whole
and she
small,
stepped
good,
back
ordinary
and
end
looked
of an
in.
ordinary day.
Her place looked the
I
way
was
it
halfway
always
to the
did
sink
late
when
at
my
night,
phone
the
buzzed
lamp on
by
the
the
couch.
One
mug
message
in the sink,
from
a
Hannah,
blanket half,
a voice
sliding
memo,
off the arm
41
of the chair,
seconds
but
long.
none of it felt
I figured
ordinary
she thought of
anymore.
one more
Not
thing
with her
to give me a
standing
hard
there,
time about,
waiting
the
for
way
me
she
to
say
always
the
did
one
after we
thing I
hung
should have
up.
said a long
So I
time
hit
before
play
tonight.
and kept
So I
rinsing
said
my
it.
mug.
I'm
For
sorry
the
you
first
had to
second or
accidentally
two,
tell me.
it was just
like
noise
this,
before
the
I was
shuffle
brave
of
enough to
moving
figure
a
out on my
door.
own.
And then her voice
She folded
came
her
through,
arms across
closer
the
but
sweater.
not aimed at me.
That is somehow
Sorry,
not the worst
hang on, I'm
apology
going to send that
I've
to
ever
Meg,
gotten.
she said.
I'm serious,
And I almost
Hannah.
stopped it right there.
I know,
because clearly
she
the thing
said,
had gone to the
and
wrong
her voice
person,
went quiet.
but I didn't.
That's what's
And
making
the
this
recording
so
kept
hard.
running. She
And
sat down
Hannah
on the
kept
arm of the
talking,
chair,
the
thinking
way
she
she
was
did
leaving it
when
for
she
someone else.
needed something solid
Okay.
under her.
Meg, and she looked
I know
up
what
at
you're going
me,
to say.
and
Another
I
voice
watched
would
her
have
try
been
to
on the
talk
other end of
herself
a real
out of
call.
hoping.
But this was
Here's
just
what I keep
her
thinking, she
rehearsing
You're a
the
good
way
man.
she did.
You are the kind
before
of
hard
good that shows up at
conversations.
midnight.
He
Because
called
a
me again
friend
tonight.
is embarrassed.
She went on,
and I
and her
can't tell the
voice
difference.
sounded tired,
Standing here
worn
between a
thin,
man who wants
in a
me
way it never
and a
once
man who just
sounded
can't
when she was
stand to
talking
see
to
me
me.
hurt.
After another
Those look
bad
identical
day,
from where I'm
and I
sitting.
sat there and
So I need you
did
to
the
be
thing I
honest,
always do,
even if honest
I made
is
him
no.
laugh about it.
Did you
I
drive
told him
over
she was
here
beneath
because
him.
you feel
I
something,
sent him off to try again,
or
something
because
in
you
my
feel
chest
responsible?
pulled tight.
It was a
I set the
fair
mug
question,
down, and I don't know how much longer I can do it,
answer.
Meg.
So I
Because
didn't
that's
rush it.
exactly the problem.
I thought about all the
There was
ways
a
the
pause
old me
where I
would
could
have
hear her
closed that
breathe,
distance
and then
right
she
then,
said it
would have
in a
crossed
voice
the room
so
and
plain
kissed her
and let the moment
honest,
answer for me.
so strict
Because a
to the
kiss
jokes
is
that it
easier than
barely
a
sounded
sentence,
like the woman
and it
who
doesn't
could
have
laugh
to
her
be
way through
examined
into the
anything.
cold morning.
I'm in love with
And I
him.
understood,
I have been
standing
for
there,
years.
that if I did
And every
that,
time I help him
I
find
would
the
be
next
doing
girl,
the exact
I'm helping him
thing she was
leave
afraid
a
of.
little at a time.
I would be handing
and
her
I
a
keep
feeling
smiling
she couldn't
through it,
trust.
like being his best
On a
friend
night,
is
she was
enough.
already too
It isn't.
raw to wait.
It stopped being enough.
She didn't need me to be
time
swept
ago.
up.
The
She
memo
needed me
hit
to be
41
sure.
seconds.
I'm not going to
and
kiss you
went silent.
tonight.
I stood in my kitchen with
her
the tap
eyebrows
still
went up
running and did
and
not
something
move.
flickered across her face
is the part
that I
one I'm
couldn't
not proud
quite
of.
read.
My first
Hurt
thought
and
the
relief
honest, ugly
tangled
first
together.
thought. That's
Was
not
that
what
I
I
had misheard
she
her,
started.
that she meant
I know,
something
I said,
smaller.
but I want to
that
say
in love
why.
was just a thing
You just
tired
asked me the
people
most
say
honest
about their
question
friends at midnight.
anyone's asked
I
me
actually
in
reached for
years.
that because
And you
reaching
deserve a
for
real
was
answer.
easier than the
Now move.
alternative.
If I kiss
Easier
you
than
right now,
admitting that a
you'd
woman
spend the
I
rest
had
of the
leaned
night
on for
wondering
7
whether I
years,
did it
my
because I
steadiest
meant it,
person,
or
had been
just because
quietly
you were
carrying
standing
this
there
the
hoping
whole
I
time.
would. I'm not going to give you a reason to
while I
doubt
called
this
her at
before it
midnight
even
to
starts.
complain about strangers.
So no, not
and then
tonight.
the excuse fell
She was
apart
quiet for
because
a
you
long
don't
moment.
rehearse a line like
You
that.
realize,
You don't
she
send
said
it to your
slowly,
oldest friend
that
and get
most
her
men
name
would have
wrong
taken
out
the
loud.
kiss.
Unless
I
it is
know.
the truest
I've been
thing
most
you
men
have for 7
So I
years.
stopped pretending I'd
It didn't get
misheard.
either of
I
us
turned off the
anywhere.
tap. I
That
stood
got
there
the
in the quiet
smallest
and let the
breath of a
real
laugh
weight
out
of it
of her.
land.
And then
She
her
was in love
eyes
with
went
me.
bright in
She
a
had
way
been
that
for
had
years.
nothing to do with
And
laughing.
I had never
and
once
she
looked
looked down
straight
at her
at it,
hands
because looking
the ring
straight at
she
it would have
wore on
cost
her
me
right
something.
thumb, the
And it
one
was
she
so much
twisted
safer to
whenever she
keep
was
her
working up
exactly
something, where she
Then
was
tell me the real
close enough
answer,
to call,
she said.
far enough that
Not
I
tomorrow.
never had to be brave.
Now,
I
not a
thought about
kiss.
all the small
Just the
things
words.
then.
Did
The
you
ones
come
I
here
filed
because you
away
feel
as
it?
nothing,
Or because
the
you
way she
feel
goes
bad?
still whenever I
I
mention
sat down
a new
across
woman,
from her,
then
close
rally
but
with a
not
joke a
half
crowding,
second to
so
it.
we were level.
The way she
Both
remembered
things
the
are
name
true
of every diner
and
waitress in town.
I'm not going to pretend they
Yet
aren't.
never
I
once
said.
asked to be
I do
introduced
feel
to
bad.
anyone I dated.
You've been carrying
The
this
way
alone
she'd
for
said
years while I stayed
more than
comfortable.
once in that light
and that lands
tone
hard.
she used for
And
the true
I'm not going to
things,
insult you
that
by
she had
hiding
bad
it,
luck, but
and
that's
had
not
made her
why I'm
peace with
here.
it.
I'm
I had
here
heard all
because
of
the
it.
second I
I had
stopped
noticed all
pretending
of it,
I'd
the
misheard
way I'd
that
noticed
memo,
everything.
everything
And
I'd been
I
refusing
had let
to
myself
understand
about
myself
because
because understanding it would have meant
and it
doing
terrified
something,
me.
and I got in the truck anyway.
I had spent 7
Guilt
years
gets you an
being very
apology.
good at not doing
It doesn't get you out of a
My
warm
phone
house
buzzed
at
again.
midnight
Hannah,
in January.
a text this time,
Only one thing
fast
does
and
that.
clipped.
And it
Ignore
isn't
that
guilt.
memo.
She looked at
Sent
me
it to you by
for a long
accident.
time. Meant it for
And
Meg.
I let
Delete
her,
it, please.
and I didn't fill
then,
the silence.
a second
because
later,
for once I had
Danny,
nothing I needed
then
to
a
talk
third.
myself out
You
of.
didn't listen to it.
She stood
right?
up from the arm of the
and
chair,
I stood there looking at
and
those
she crossed the
3
window,
little messages,
and she
stack
stood there
up.
looking out at the
each
dark
one
street
more
for a while
careful than the
before she
last.
spoke.
And I understood,
and when she did,
with a
her
strange
voice had
steadiness,
steadied into
that whatever I
something
did in the next few minutes was
the
going to
real
divide
Hannah
my life
coming back
cleanly
into the room.
into a before
she
and
said.
after. Then I'm going
I
to
could
say
type
my part.
back, didn't hear a thing.
And hand her
I'm
the
gonna say
exit
it right
because
begging
I'm
for.
done
And
saying
we
it
could
into a
both
phone
climb
by
back
accident.
into the safe shape
She
we'd
turned around
worn
and
for
faced
7
me.
years.
For 7 years,
Comfortable and
I have been the
hollow,
girl you call.
and never speak
I'm good at
again.
it. I'm
That
the
was
one
the
who makes
easy
you
road
laugh
after
and God,
bad ones.
part of me
And
wanted it
tells you
because
the
the
next
easy
one might be
road was
different,
familiar.
and
I have
it didn't
hated
ask
every
anything
minute
of
of being good at
I
it.
stared at the
because every
screen
time
a
I helped
long
you
moment.
find someone else,
Then
I
I
was
did the
handing
thing
away
the
the
old
thing
me
I
never
wanted
would have
most.
done.
And
I
telling
didn't type a
myself
lie,
that being near
and I
you
didn't
was
smooth
enough.
it over.
It was
and I
never
didn't
enough.
give her the out.
And the worst part
Instead,
is that
I
I
let
let
it
it
go
go
on.
She let it
because I
ring
decided
4 times.
all on my own, that alone, you never feel it everything. Because Hannah never let me ring than to risk being nothing. When she finally answered, she didn't say hello. But I'm not making it again. You listened to it. She took a breath. And it wasn't a question. So here's what I want. And her voice was small in a way I'm only going to say never heard from her. I don't want to be the girl you call after the bad dates. Yeah, I want there to be no more bad dates. The silence that came back. I want to be the one you come home to, not angry. I want you to be mortified, all the way sure, someone wishing not sorry, open, not swept. This was a woman who could argue a part supplier down to cost. Then I need you to walk into a crowded diner, and I'll be okay, and have the whole counter because I've been carrying this alone for years. And she had gone completely quiet. But I'm not going to shrink myself down to a phone call ever again. I can explain it. Not even for you. She said finally. I have replayed that she seemed to hear more times than I sounded the second. Not because it was pretty. You don't have to explain it. Her voice cracked. That's easy for you to say. And she wiped her eyes with the sleeve. I said, and I meant it. Big gray. It really is halfway through. Another silence. I replayed it quieter because it was the bravest thing you'd ever watched a person. I know. And now standing in everything's living room at 1 a.m, and I'm going to lose asking out loud for the thing. I actually spent 7 years pretending she didn't. Just tell me we can pretend. I didn't rescue her from that silence. Please. I let her
I'd rather
have you as my best friend
because
than
it was
not have you
hers
at and
all.
she'd
I wasn't
earned it.
supposed to hear
And when
it.
I finally
If
answered,
the app had lagged one more
I kept
second,
it plain, or if
the
I'd
way
set
the
the phone
true
down
things
instead
have
of
to
leaving
be.
it pressed to my
I'm sure,
ear,
I said.
or if
Not
I hadn't
sorry.
been standing
Not
in my
swept
own
up.
kitchen at
Sure.
midnight,
I don't want you to be
wired
the girl I
sleep,
call.
none
I
of
want you
this
to be
would
the
happen,
one
but the
I come
memo
home to.
played, and
I
I
have
heard
wanted that
every
for longer
word,
than I had
and
the
what she
courage
said,
to
and it
know,
changed the whole
and you
shape
saying
of
it
my
first
life.
didn't make it true.
Her name was Hannah.
It just made me stop
and she had been my
hiding from it.
best friend
She
for
let out a
almost 7
breath
years.
that was half laugh,
long enough to know
half
exactly
something
how
that had
she
been
took
held
her
down
coffee,
for years,
which was too much cream,
and her shoulders
finally
refusal
came
to
down
admit
from
it.
around her ears
Exactly
for the
what
first
her
time all
voice
night.
did when
Do
she
you
was
realize how
pretending she
much
wasn't
easier
hurt?
this would have been?
And exactly
she said,
how many rings
if
it
you'd
took her to
figured it
answer
out on
when I
your
called
own,
late.
instead of
Usually
making me
3.
confess
That
by
night,
accident
before any
to
of
a
us.
machine. It had been
I'm the one who was late. You make it home okay?
I said. She asked
I've been
the
late
second
this
she
whole
picked up.
time.
I caught
You've been
myself
standing here
smiling
for
before
7
I could
years
stop it.
waiting for me
Hello
to
to you
catch
too.
up.
Did
Yeah.
you?
She said
Yes, Mom.
softly. Don't
I
stop.
have. That was
Then let
Hannah,
me catch up.
quick
across
and
the
warm
room
and a little
slow,
dangerous when she was
giving
in a
her
good mood.
every second
We met
to step
7
back
years
if she
back,
wanted,
out behind a
and she didn't.
hardware store.
Can I
because she
now?
reversed her
I
truck
asked
straight
because
into the
after
side of
everything,
mine
I wasn't
in a
going to
gravel
assume.
lot.
And
She
then
rolled her
refused
eyes
flat
and it was
out
so
to
completely
apologize for
her.
it.
The
I came out with a bag of
exasperation
fence
and the wet
staples,
lashes at the
and
same time.
I found her
that I
leaning on her
nearly laughed.
tailgate like the
You
dent
drove
was
across
somehow
town
my
in
fault
January
for
and made a
parking where
whole
trucks
speech
reverse.
about not
You
kissing
are
me,
unbelievably
she said.
calm about
And
this.
now you're
she
asking
said.
permission.
I'm deciding
Seemed
whether you're
important
worth
to do
the
it right.
paperwork.
Yes,
I told
Danny,
her.
she said.
She grinned.
You can
at me.
now. I
So
usually
did.
am.
Soft at
She was
first.
right.
After
Careful.
that, we became
the kind of kiss
the
that
kind of
feels
friends
less like a
people
sudden
always
decision,
read wrong,
and more like
late
finally
calls
setting
after
down
long
something
shifts,
heavy you didn't
diner
even
runs
know
at
you'd been
hours
carrying.
no decent
When we
diner
pulled apart,
should
she
be
stayed
open.
close.
Phone
Her
calls on
forehead
bad
almost
days.
against mine.
Phone calls on good
and she was
days.
smiling
Phone
in that
calls
quiet,
when nothing at all was
stunned
wrong.
way people
And
smile.
one
when
of
a
us just
thing
didn't
they've
feel like
long
being
given
alone
up on.
in
It
a
turns
quiet
out
house.
somehow
People assumed
to be
there was
real
more to
after
it.
all.
We always
Well,
said there wasn't.
She whispered.
Or to be
That'd
fair,
change
I said there
everything.
wasn't. You're the one
Hannah
who sent the
usually just
memo
gave
to
me
the
that
wrong person,
unreadable little
I said.
smile.
She
and let
laughed.
people believe
The tears
whatever they
finally
wanted.
spilling
That should have told me
over
something.
into something happy.
So should the way she went
Best mistake
quiet
I've made
whenever
all
I
year,
mention a woman
she
I was
said.
seeing,
And it's only
or
January.
The way every
A week
date
later,
I
I
ever
still
went
call
on
Hannah
felt
at night.
temporary.
The
in a
only
way she
difference was
never
that
once
now
did.
she answered with,
Some
"Hey,"
people become
instead of such a
you make it home
built-in
okay
part of your
and
days.
so
I stopped
woven
pretending
into
the
them
best part of
that
my
you
day
stop
was just a
asking what they
habit.
mean because the
Something
honest
I never
answer
bothered
feels
to
too
examine.
big to
It
pick
wasn't
up.
a habit, so I didn't
It was
ask.
her.
I
It
just
had
called
probably
the way
been
I
her for
always
years,
did, that
longer
night.
than I ever
After
had
a
the nerve to
miserable
admit.
dinner with a woman
3
named
months in,
Ashley,
she left a
who had spent
toothbrush
most
in
of the
my
meals
place,
checking her
then a coffee
reflection in the
mug with
back
too
of her
much
spoon.
cream
That
still
bad.
dried in the bottom.
Hannah asked when I
Then,
finished.
without either
She
of
asked
us
me if
quite
I thought
deciding it,
emotional
most of her
availability
mornings
was hereditary.
She'd sit on my counter
That is a
while I made
real sentence
breakfast
a grown woman
and read
said
me
to
the
you.
ridiculous
Dead
things people
serious.
typed into the vet
Hannah
clinics
laughed,
after hours lying.
soft and
I'd
bright,
tell her about whatever
and
truck
familiar
was up
enough
on my
to make the
lift,
whole wasted
and it was the most
evening
ordinary
feel
thing
lighter.
in the world.
Please tell
I
me you
never
at
once
least got a
tired of
decent
it.
steak out of it.
By summer,
I
she
paid
stopped keeping her own place
$34
warm
to
for
be
no reason.
psychologically
And she moved the
evaluated
rest of her
over
things
survey.
across town.
That one
And
is on you.
The drive that used
I was
to
trying
take
to
me
keep an
6
open
minutes
mind.
became no drive.
You were
at
trying
all,
to be
because
politely
she was already
stupid.
home when I got there.
Also true.
We fell into
I
the
could hear her
small
moving
shared
around her
rhythms.
place while
I'd
we
watched
talked,
other couples
the
have.
cabinet and
the
the
tap
quietly
running,
assumed
the
work
low
from
tick
me.
of her furnace
Groceries
kicking
on Sundays.
It was such an
her
ordinary
humming
call.
off key.
That was the part
in
one
truck.
keep coming back
The
to.
way she'd steal
So
the last
ordinary
of
that
my
I
coffee,
almost missed the
then
way
deny
she
it
kept
flatly
going quiet
with the mug
every
still
single
in her
time I
hand.
circled back
I
to
kept
Ashley.
waiting for the ordinary to
I
wear
said,
thin,
towing my boots
the way
off
it
by the
always had
door.
before.
I think I'm
And
officially
it never
done
did
letting
because
people
the
set me
ordinary
up.
was the whole
That's
point,
probably healthy,
and it was
or
hers,
dramatic,
and that
which you would tend
changed
to be
it.
both.
There was one
I
night
laughed
late
and
that
leaned
fall,
against
almost
the
a year
counter.
to the day.
What would I
from
do
the
without
memo,
you?
when I
The
finally
line
told
went
her
quiet.
the thing I've been holding
Not
on
dead,
to?
just that
We were
small
on the
pause
couch.
that means a
The
question
lamp
landed
on,
somewhere
one
deeper
mug
than
in
it
the
was
sink,
aimed.
a
Hannah,
blanket half
I'm here.
sliding off
Her
the
voice
arm
had
of the
shifted
chair.
a little,
The whole
whole scene
gone
near
softer.
enough to that first
And then
night
she cleared her
that it
throat
felt
and
deliberate.
said,
I
too
told her I'd
lightly,
never deleted the memo.
"Probably date women
She
who
went
don't
still.
cross-examine
You said you would,
over dinner."
she said. That's a high
I know.
bar.
I
You'd be
lied.
surprised
I
how
told
low the
her.
current one
It's
sits.
the bravest thing
I smiled.
anyone ever
Night,
did for
Hannah.
me.
And you
Night,
did it by
Danny.
accident.
I ended the
And
call.
you did it at me
and
instead of
set
the
about
phone
me.
face down on the
And
counter.
I wasn't about to
And
erase the
that
moment.
should have been
my
that the whole
life
small,
turned
good,
over.
ordinary
She
end
didn't
of an
say
ordinary
anything
day.
for a second.
I was halfway
and
to
then
the
she
sink
put her
when
head
my
on my
phone
shoulder
buzzed on the counter.
I
One
felt her
message
smile against
from
my
Hannah,
collarbone.
a
A
voice
little
memo,
after that first
41
anniversary.
seconds long.
I asked her to
I figured
marry
she'd
me,
thought of one more
and I
thing
did it
to
with
give me
no
a
speech
hard
at
time
all,
about,
because
the
we'd
way she
already
always
said the
did
hard
after we
things.
hung up.
So
and
I
the
hit
plain
play
ones were the only
and
ones left.
kept rinsing my mug.
She said yes
For the
before
first
I
second
finished
or
the
two,
sentence.
it was just
then made me
noise,
finish it anyway.
the shuffle
because
of her
she said
moving
she'd earned
a
the whole
door,
thing,
and then her
after
voice
waiting
came through
7 years.
closer, but
She
not
wasn't
aimed
wrong.
at me. We got
Sorry,
married the
hang
next
on, I'm gonna
spring
send
in
that
her
to
parents'
Meg,
backyard.
she said,
Under a
and I
tenor
almost stopped
father,
it right
and I
there,
put up
because
ourselves
clearly
the
the thing
morning
had gone to the wrong
and when the
person.
officiant
But I
asked if
didn't,
anyone had anything
and
to
the
say,
recording kept
Meg
running,
stood up and
and
told
Hannah
the whole
kept talking,
crowd the story of
thinking
the
she
voice
was
memo.
leaving it for someone
Every
else.
mortifying
Okay,
word.
Meg, Hannah laughed.
I know what you're going to
so
say.
hard she had a hold
Another
on my
voice would have been
arm
on
to
the
stay
other end of a
standing.
real call.
I didn't mind.
But this was
It
just
was the
her
truest toast
rehearsing
anyone gave.
the way she
And
did
here's the
before
strange
hard
thing I keep
conversations.
landing on.
He
All
called me
this
again
time later.
tonight.
She
I spent
went
my
on,
days
and her
noticing
voice
what other
sounded
people
tired,
miss, a wobble,
worn
and axle,
thin,
a sound
in a way
an
it
engine
never
3
once
weeks before
sounded
it
when she was
fails.
talking to
And I
me.
had missed the
After another
biggest thing
bad
in my
day,
own life,
and I
for
sat
7
there
straight
and
years,
did the thing I
sitting right
always
across
do.
the diner booth.
I made
from
him
me,
laugh about it,
telling
I
me
told him she
every
was
hard
beneath
trim
him.
I ever
sent him
needed
off to try
and
again.
pretending
Something
didn't
in my
want anything
chest
back.
pulled tight.
It took a machine.
I set the mug down.
She forgot to check.
And I don't know
to
how
make me
much
finally
longer I
look.
can do it, Meg.
So tell me,
Because that's
if you've been
exactly the
standing in
problem.
that kitchen at midnight,
There was a pause
and you'd
where I could
heard the
hear her
truest
breathe,
thing your
and then she
oldest
said
friend
it, never
in a
meant for
voice
you to
so
hear.
plain
Would
and
you have
so
deleted it
honest,
and kept things
so
safe?
stripped of the jokes,
Or would you have found
that
your
it barely
boots and
sounded
driven
like a
across
woman who
town?
could laugh her
And what's
way
the
through
thing in your own life
I'm in love with
you've been
him.
noticing for
I have been
years
for years
and refusing
and every
to
time I
understand?
help him find an ex
Leave it in the
girl,
comments.
I'm helping him
I'd like to
leave
know
a little
if
at a
this
time.
story stayed with
and I
you.
keep
Go ahead
smiling
and like
through
the
it,
video,
being his best
and
friend
subscribe
is
to the
enough.
channel, and
It
I'll
is.
see you in the next
It
one.
stopped being enough a long time ago. The memo hit 41 seconds and went silent.